A man is serving life in prison for murder, and right now, he's crouched low in the prison yard, watching another inmate finish a cigarette. The guy takes one last drag, flicks the butt onto a table, walks away. And this convicted killer, this man the entire state believes is a monster, moves toward it like it's made of gold. He doesn't touch it. Not yet. He asks another prisoner to stand guard over it. Because that soggy little cigarette butt is the only thing on earth that can prove he didn't do it. I'm Cole, and this is Midnight Files. Let me take you back to the beginning, because to understand how a man ends up smuggling a cigarette butt out of a maximum security prison, you have to understand everything he lost first. His name is Clarence Elkins, and in the summer of 1998, he's just an ordinary guy in Ohio. Married, 2 sons. A wife named Melinda he's been with for years. They live in a little town called Magnolia, about 40 miles from where this nightmare is about to happen. Melinda's mother is a woman named Judy Johnson, 58 years old, lives alone in Barberton, Ohio. And on the night of June 6th, she's got company. Her 6-year-old granddaughter, Brooke, is staying over. That same night, Clarence is out. He's drinking with friends. He gets home around 2:40 in the morning, crawls into bed next to Melinda, who's up with a sick kid. A completely normal night. But across those 40 miles, in Judy Johnson's house, someone breaks in. And what happens next is the kind of thing that doesn't leave you. The intruder attacks Judy, beats her, rapes her, strangles her, so violently that her nose, her jaw, her collarbone, her skull, all of it shattered. By the time he's done, Judy Johnson is gone. And then he realizes there's a witness, a little girl, 6 years old. So he turns on Brooke. He beats her too, and he leaves her there, for dead. Then he walks out into the dark and disappears. But Brooke doesn't die. Hours later, she wakes up, covered in her own blood, her grandmother lying dead nearby, and somehow, this tiny, broken little girl gets to her feet. She calls a neighbor and leaves a message. Someone killed her grandmother. Then she walks to another neighbor's house, a woman named Tanya Brazil. And here's the first thing that should make your skin crawl. Tonya opens the door. She sees a 6-year-old standing there, beaten, bloody, barely able to stand. And instead of grabbing the phone and screaming for an ambulance, she leaves the child on the porch for more than 30 minutes. Only later does she finally drive Brooke home and let the adults call the police. Remember that gap, that half hour. It's going to matter more than anyone knows. When the police finally talk to Brooke, they ask her the only question that counts. Who did this? And the little girl says, he looked like Uncle Clarence. Uncle Clarence, Melinda's husband, Judy's son-in-law, a man Brooke knows. That's it. That's all they need. The next day, the police come for Clarence. They arrest him. They charge him with the murder of his mother-in-law and the brutal attack on a 6-year-old child. Now picture Melinda's world in that one moment. Her mother, murdered. Her little niece, beaten and left for dead. And her husband, dragged away in handcuffs, accused of doing all of it. Her own niece is the one pointing the finger. She keeps thinking, this can't be happening, this isn't real. But it gets more real. The case goes to trial in 1999. And here's the thing. There is almost nothing tying Clarence to that crime scene. No forced entry. No fingerprints. No DNA. They pull hairs off Judy's body and out of Brooke's clothes. They run them. And they don't match Clarence. Not even close. Melinda testifies he was home, 40 miles away. Other people back her up. They were drinking with him that night. None of it matters. Because a jury looks at a sobbing 6-year-old girl who says Uncle Clarence did it. And that is the most powerful thing in any courtroom on earth. They convict him. Life in prison. No parole. Ever. And the family tears itself apart. Half of them are sure he's guilty. And when Melinda stands up and says, "No, my husband did not do this," they turn on her. Her own people. They look at her like she's defending the monster who killed her mother and raped her niece. She loses almost everyone. But she does not stop. This is where Melinda Elkins becomes something else entirely. A stay-at-home mom turns into an investigator. She hires a private investigator. She burns through the family's savings. She raises tens of thousands of dollars on her own. She reads every page of that case file until she's got it memorized. And then, in 2002, something shifts. Brooke, older now, sits down and says the words that should have ended it all. She says, "It couldn't have been Clarence. The man who hurt her and her grandmother had brown eyes. Clarence's eyes are blue." She recants. On camera, she says she was never sure. She'd only seen the back of a head in the dark, one glimpse of a face right before everything went black, and the grown-ups around her ran with it. So Clarence appeals, and the judge says, no. The judge decides the little girl was probably coached by the family after they reconciled. Denied. So Melinda goes after the DNA. She fights to get those hairs from the crime scene retested with modern science. The results come back. They exclude Clarence completely. The DNA on the victims does not belong to him. And they appeal again, and the court says no again. The ruling is almost impossible to believe. They say, since the jury convicted him on the girl's word and not on DNA in the first place, the DNA doesn't change anything. 7 years in, and the system keeps slamming the door. But Melinda keeps circling back to one thing she can't let go of. That neighbor, Tonya Brazel, that 30 minutes on the porch. Why would a woman leave a bleeding child outside instead of calling for help? What was she doing? What, or who, was she protecting? So Melinda digs into Tonya's life, and there it is. At the time of the murder, Tonya was living with a man, a common-law husband. His name is Earl Mann. Earl Mann is a convicted sex offender, and he had been released from prison just 2 days before Judy Johnson was murdered. 2 days. And by the time Melinda finds all this out, Earl Mann is back behind bars, locked up for raping 3 little girls. Now here's the part that sounds made up. It isn't. Earl Mann is in the same prison as Clarence. The man Melinda now believes is the real killer is breathing the same air as her wrongfully convicted husband. So Melinda goes to visit Clarence, and she tells him straight, "I don't know how I know, but this is the guy. This is the man who did it." And Clarence looks across that visiting room, and Earl Mann is right there, sitting by the window. Now Clarence needs proof. He needs Mann's DNA. But you can't just walk up to a man in prison and ask for it. So he waits. He watches. Day after day. And one day, in the rec area, Earl Mann finishes a cigarette and leaves the butt sitting on a table. This is the moment from the hook. Clarence doesn't grab it with his bare hands. He's smart enough to know one wrong move ruins everything. He gets another inmate to guard it while he finds something clean. He wraps that cigarette butt in toilet paper. Careful, like it's the most precious thing he's ever held. Then comes the hard part, getting it out. He spends the next 2 weeks quietly working the prison black market just to get his hands on a plastic bag, something sealed, so the sample won't get contaminated in the mail. He's breaking prison rules just by doing this. If he's caught, it's over. But he does it. He gets the cigarette butt out of the prison, and into the hands of his attorney, and into a lab. And the results come back. The saliva on that cigarette butt, Earl Mann's DNA, matches the unknown DNA found on both victims. A match. A man serving life just solved his own case, from inside a prison cell. You'd think that's the end. You'd think they'd open the gates right then. They don't. The prosecutor fights it. There are arguments about whether skin cell DNA is good enough. In July of 2005, a judge denies the motion for a new trial again. It takes the Ohio Attorney General himself, Jim Petro, stepping in and holding a public press conference to pressure the prosecutor to let this man go. They run more DNA tests on the hairs. Earl Mann. Again. Every time, Earl Mann. And finally, on December 15, 2005, the charges against Clarence Elkins are dismissed. After 7.5 years for a crime he did not commit, he walks out of that prison, in regular clothes, no guards, his family waiting for him. 3 years later, Earl Mann pleads guilty. The murder of Judy Johnson, the attacks on Little Brook. He's sentenced to spend the rest of his life behind bars. And there's one more gut punch buried in this case. Years earlier, back when Mann was first arrested for something else, a drunk Earl Mann had actually said to a police officer, "Why don't you charge me with the Judy Johnson murder?" That comment was written into a police memo, and it was never handed over to Clarence's defense. If it had been, he might never have spent a single day in that cell. Clarence eventually receives settlements that add up to around $6 million from the state and from the city of Barberton. And here's the thing about the man they called a monster. He shares that money with his attorneys, with his 2 sons, and with Melinda, the wife who spent 7.5 years and every dollar they had clawing him out of that hole. He becomes an advocate. He helps push Ohio to pass a landmark law to protect innocent people from exactly what happened to him. But this story doesn't get a clean, happy ending, because real life rarely does. Clarence and Melinda don't make it. Shortly after he comes home, they divorce. And it isn't bitterness, it's something quieter and sadder than that. Melinda put it like this: for 7.5 years, she had to bury her feelings so deep just to survive the fight, that by the time she won, the feeling of being his wife was gone. It's a lot, she said, to come back from. They both eventually remarry. They stay friends. She saved his life. She gave up everything, her family, her savings, almost herself, to prove that the man everyone hated was innocent. And in the end, the thing they couldn't get back was each other.